Hello, I'm Vic Giljus, and this podcast to help you with your well-being, and I'm doing it to help myself with mine, is called, it's episode 33, You Can't Fix Yourself, What Can? So it's like a question, I suppose, but what I'm going to go through here is that there is something that can. We can't fix ourselves, believe me, no matter how much we try. The best we can do is the best we can do, but there are other ways that we are helped. And what I'm going to do is I wrote a book quite a while ago now, 5 years ago, called Evolving Thought. And on one of the stories, page 16, is entitled What We Think is the Truth. Now, in that, I go on about the fact that we have stories about life in our head. We have concepts of things, beliefs, ideas, and it may seem a little bit wrong to say, so I don't want to criticise the way in which you think or I think, but they are all illusions, all made up. They are what we think is the truth. Now, let me give you an example of this. Sir Isaac Newton, he not discovered gravity because it was always there, but Sir Isaac Newton created a formula for how masses, bodies like the moon and the earth, attract one another, gravity. And basically, the apple that fell on his head from the tree, the rate at which that apple, when it fell from the tree, how far it had to go to hit the ground, Isaac Newton could calculate how fast it would hit the ground, etc. Quite clever. So, so he formulated, it was a concept, an equation for how gravity works. Well, how true was that? When Einstein came along with his E equals mc squared, and encapsulated in all that is how gravity works. And so Einstein redefined Sir Isaac Newton's equation. In other words, he gave more depth to the equation, proving that that it was more real. It was a more accurate model. That's the word. But it wasn't reality. It was not the truth. And so when we look at things like that, then we could look, say, in the book, which I referred to in one of my podcasts called A Course in Miracles, where A Course in Miracles, right in the preface, at the beginning of the book, it says, nothing unreal exists. So the point I'm making here is that our thoughts, our beliefs, our concepts, models that we hold in our mind about how things work are not the truth. They only approximate the truth. They are not what is, we think they're real, but they are an approximation. And as A Course in Miracles, as I've said, nothing unreal exists. Then why would we be fearful of our thoughts? Do you see what I mean? But we take our thoughts to be so true that we get frightened of them. So, in other words, when we have what I call this, our brain, our thinking can cause psychological suffering. That is because we are relating to some concepts or some ideas or some beliefs of how things should be that upset us. In other words, there shouldn't be what we think there should be. They differ. And therefore we get upset, psychological suffering. And the thing that caused it in the first place is our mind, our thoughts that we are looking at. And to give you a clue there is, when we can look at our thoughts, that means we are not our thoughts. We are more than our thoughts. So, give you another example of this in the same vein. I got my PhD for creating a model of how factories, companies in manufacturing work. So you get a design for a product which comes into reality by manufacturing the product, and then it goes out of the factory to the customer. And my formulation of the model was quite detailed. In other words, it looked at how the different functions in an organisation might view how that product is manufactured. So, for example, I was a manufacturing man, so I design and manufacture a product, but then marketing get hold of it and say, the product to sell better has got to have pink dots on it. In other words, do it so that the customer is attracted to it. Then finance would say to me, you've got to make it of cheaper material to get the costs down, and so on and so on. So every function would have a say in how that product went through the factory. So, and in many cases, and I've been involved in this, in charge of manufacturing, that I was at odds with who was in charge of marketing, or who was in charge of finance, who was in charge of personnel. We should employ these type of people instead of these type of people to do it, and so on and so on. And so when you see the analogy between, so that, in other words, I could have got quite upset about all that as a manufacturing manager, but I looked at a thing, and this was my research, to look into a thing called acceptance, that each function could have their say, but we needed to look at how it would pan out. In other words, look at the way in which we were going to manufacture it from a marketing viewpoint, or a personnel viewpoint, or a finance or marketing viewpoint, and see what it looked like. And that's what it's all about, is when we are aware of life in front of us and see what it looks like, then we can decide what to do. Because otherwise, all we're doing is fighting and arguing. So there is an example of how, getting away from the factory, of how our thinking process works, so how our mind works. Our mind works to say, well, they said this, but I think this. They don't like this, but I like this. So we're all separate, we're all at odds, we're all fighting. And that's what I mean by that, is that unless you see through the fact that it's all made up, it's all a model, it's all concepts, you can, and until you see that and see what the game that is being played, and not take it seriously, see through the game, and in fact enjoy the fact that it's a game, you're a better player at the game. But we don't do that. We take sides in our mind. There's us and there's them, when in actual fact there's just a oneness. Then we get upset with them because they're not like us. And what I'm saying here is that in reality there is no us. We're all one. So we're not different to them. They're not different to us. And if they seem to be different, it's because their stories, their ideas, their concepts, their conditioning is at odds with ours. And so that's all a dream. That's all made up. That all comes from their perceptions of things, and our perceptions, which are different. It is still just perceptions. It is still just a mirage. It appears to be there, but it's not there. So why are we all getting out of our cot, or throwing our toys out of the cot because something to somebody else looks different to us? We're all living in our own thought-created reality. And when we start to see that, then we start to take ourselves less seriously. We can basically, looking at it from the other side of the fence, is why get upset with somebody who disagrees with you because they're coming at it from their stance on reality, their model of reality, their conditioning. So in that sense, they're doing what they think is right, although we may think it's wrong. And in that sense, because they're doing what they think is correct, they are innocent. They're doing the best they know. And taking our viewpoint, which it may be at odds, we're doing the best we can. But if we take this too far, take this too seriously, and say, we're in a war. Now, there is no need for war when we can actually have peace and enjoy what is right in front of us through our awareness. So that is the answer there, is that when we go back to our being, which is not this is part of us, which is not even our body. We have a mind and a body, but that is just a container for the space within, which is our awareness, which is our essence, and that is life energy, which is intelligent. And when we zoom out of all the detail of the arguments, us and them, what we like, what they like, their models, their perceptions, their thought-created reality, which is basically not true. It is not the truth. So why take it too seriously? And why let it cause psychological pain? We don't have to do that. We can enjoy what is right in front of us. And I was reading a book the other day, which is title is What is Wrong with Right Now If We Don't Think About Stuff. Well, that's true. So, I can look out my window and I can see, and I've done this before, there's a nice blue sky today. It's a bit chilly outside, a bit nippy, but it's warm in the sun, fluffy clouds and all the rest of it. And there's a tree in my garden and it is wonderful because I'm just kind of just aware without putting a label on it, anything. But, if I stood up and looked down at my garden, I could straight away create a label which says, oh, I should have cut the grass. My neighbour cut the grass last week and his grass is nice and tidy and mine is not. It needs cutting. Oh, dearie me, what aren't I terrible? I should go and get my grass cutter broke. What am I going to do? Have I got any petrol? Before you know where you are, you can go down this rabbit hole of misery. And it's just a thought. So why don't we look at what is in front of us, right in the here and now, and without those thoughts, which we don't need. We need our intellect, our thoughts for other things. How to bake a cake, I'm going on holiday, how to pack my case, suntan lotion. In fact, I've used my brain to create an itinerary of what I need. Clean the toilets, empty the fridge before you go out. Have you booked the taxi? Da-di-da-di-da-di-da. That's using the mind, using the intellect. But the intellect can't solve psychological suffering. There's only one thing that we know about, well, it's two things. Two things is when we go away from thought, in other words, see through thought for what it is, as an illusion, and come to our awareness, which is not in here, it is inside. It is a field of energy. When we relate to that, that is always there. It was there when we were born. It was there when we got the terrible twos, the ego. It's still here in our adult ego, which is us and them. We don't like this because they don't, that's all thought created realities, which is not the truth. The truth is just being aware, which has always been with us since we were born. In fact, awareness was there before we were born, and awareness will be there after we die. It's always there. It always exists. It's energy, and it is aware. And when we come to that, which is okay. Another point on this, have you noticed that sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad? So in other words, that's telling you that thought is not constant. In the past, when you like make a decision, you think, I'm sure I should do this. And then 2 years later, you say, why on earth did I do that? Oh, what was I thinking of? There you go. It doesn't know. It can't know because it's a thought. It is not constant. And what is not constant is not the truth. The truth is what has always been there is awareness, isness. It's within us. Okay? That is the real us. That is the real you. Always there, always will be. And that is the truth. It can be relied upon. Now, I'm watching a really good BBC series called The Newsreader. It's so good. It's set in the 1980s in Australia, and it shows the ins and outs and the politics in this particular newsroom, where the 6 o'clock news has to be, top of the pops on this particular channel and beat other news channels. So there's a lot of jostling and politics for them. This news at 6, this Australian programme, to be the best. And it shows you all the infighting and what have you. And really, it's what a manic environment it is. And it just shows you, even to when the newscaster is there, the cameras are on the newscaster, and the guy is counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And prior to that, they've all been made up, powder puff and all the rest of it to look correct on the screen. And it's a right faff. And I know a little bit about this because for about 4 or 5 years, I was asked probably fortnightly to appear on a thing called Nottingham TV, Notts TV. And I was there, so there'd be somebody playing the guitar and I'd be talking about happiness. So, and another time I'd be talking about happiness and there'd be somebody reciting poetry. And that's so basically they set it up a little bit so they would pose happy type questions to me. What do you think about this, Vic, and what do you think about that? And it was quite nice and enjoyable. But when I first went into the studio, I remember they used to wire me up. When I say wire me up, so you had a microphone tucked away somewhere, and basically the microphone was there and a power pack at the back, and so that when you talked, you could be heard. And then you went in the little TV studio, and I remember saying to the guy who was taking me through when it was my turn to speak, what about the makeup? Because, I thought, I'm going to be on camera, please, and he kind of, what are you talking about? So it was a bit of a disillusionment straight away. I didn't get, any eye blush on or whatever they call it, powder on myself. And when I went through, there was none of this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What it was is that there was the cameraman, and he as I came in, he just said, "When the red light goes on, Vic, you start speaking." And so it was calm. There was no fuss. Just go in, red light, speak. But what did surprise me was, well, not surprise me, but the presenter would talk about bits and bobs about the programme and then introduce me, give a bit of background to who I was and what I was going to do. But he was reading off an autocue, which was adjacent to the camera. So the viewer, really, it's as if they're kind of thinking about this as they're doing it, but not. They're just reading what's on the autocue. And so, in a way, I lost a little bit of respect because I thought, oh, crikey, their job's dead easy because all they do is just read the autocue. It looks as if they have had to remember all the lines. Like when you go to the theatre. I went the other night to watch a performance, and it was 2 hours long, and the actress was just kind of new lines. It was really good. It was about Mary Whitehouse. It was fantastic. She was playing the part of her. And an hour before an hour, then the break, and then an hour after. It was phenomenal. And so when I saw these people reading from the autocue, I thought, But in actual fact, to be fair, there is a skill in using an autocue. So you don't just kind of read it like a robot. there's inflections and what have you, and the way in which they do it, the way in which they look at you when they're asking you questions, the way in which they look to screen. So it is an art, but that did quite surprise me about the whole situation. But anyway, I'm getting away from the point I'm trying to make is that in life, we look at life's auto cues. So in other words, we stop being us because we are looking at what, somebody says something and then your mind says, oh, I should say this back. And it's a little bit political that when somebody's talking to you, you're thinking of what you should say next. And so it is, again, all a little bit false. And especially when you start seeing that people are using, I've got my mobile phone with me, but looking at their phones all the time, social media, is that people have been programmed through the media how to think. The news tells them this and they might believe it. And if it was in a different country, you get a different type of news. So who are you going to believe? And this is why they've got programmes like BBC Verify to check the news. But everything is slanted. So when we listen to our bosses at work, they will give us a particular picture. When we listen to our friends, they will give us a particular picture. When we listen to religious people, they will give us a particular... So in other words, we are looking at life's auto cue. So when we are mixing with people who are stuck in what I would call psychological pain, if we're not careful, we can start to join them at that level of consciousness in the fact that we may believe that that is true when it's not true, because there is no need to go there. And I will add something here, is that when people are in a low mood or a low state of consciousness, so they are in fear, say, of being hurt, even that is a form of love, because they're in fear of being hurt because they love themselves. They don't want themselves to be hurt. When they look at past memories that upset them, they're only doing that because they don't want those memories to upset them. Do you see? So everything is a kind of a shade of dark or light. But some people live in the dark. And even though that is a form of love, a form of self-protection, what I'm saying is that it is not needed for them to live there, because that is not reality. It is what they think is reality. And sometimes they think they have to be there because their beliefs and approach to life guides them in that direction. And what I'm making here is that we can back away from all the detail of that, back away from life's auto cue. And this is the biggest auto cue because it's full of all past scripts of auto cue of how we react in a particular situation, how we think we should behave in a situation, what our parents told us, what our teachers told us, and so on and so on. And the real wisdom doesn't come from that. It comes from backing off from that towards our awareness, towards our consciousness. So now, this doesn't mean to say that this, if you look at it, that being conscious in this way, we come into a land or a realm where everything is fluffy bunny-like and we're all hopping around contented fluffy bunnies, really loving life, little Miss Sunshine. Oh, isn't life wonderful? Well, life is life. What I'm saying is that we make our way in this, and well, one thing I would say is that when we are, misery doesn't come first. Happiness doesn't come first. But when we are content, in other words, there is an acceptance there. So I look out there and I'm quite content. Even though my grass may be growing, I am content with the fact that I am breathing, I'm above the ground, even though I'm 80 years old, you won't get rid of me yet, I'm still here, that I'm content. And once you're content, then that opens possibilities for life's adventure. And it is an adventure. So when you're working from that place, and we can all work from contentment because we are all okay in the moment, apart from many thoughts we may have. We don't have to have them thoughts. We can just be aware. We can just be okay. Now, as I said, it doesn't mean to say that we are fluffy bunnies and content. That would be really boring. What it means is that when we are in that level of consciousness, which is deep, and it is infinite, then there are all sorts of things to explore with each other. There are all sorts of ways in which we can make life better, be better ourselves in life, because we can see more, because we are not restricted by our mental bandwidth, which sometimes, it does, it holds us back. And that is why people like Einstein never got on with school, because he didn't see the point in memorising what the teacher was saying in order to repeat it in an examination. You know, what does that do for you? So I'll stop ranting on, and I'm going to read now a Kafka, Franz Kafka quote. I've done this before, I remember, but I'll read it again, because what it's really saying is that when you get to this state of awareness, this openness, then you see possibilities, and life is conspiring with you, because you are life. Whereas this takes you out of life and tries to plot it its particular way, which is very narrow. When you are open to possibilities, open to life, life basically is rewarding. Let me read what Franz Kafka said. You do not need to leave your room. Remain sitting at your table and listen. Do not even listen. Simply wait. Be quiet, still and solitary. The world will freely offer itself to you to be unmasked. It has no choice. It will roll in ecstasy at your feet. That's so true. You don't need to do all the hard work. You don't need to bear down. You don't need the willpower. You just need to be open and with your awareness. And that's when you are totally in life. That's when the synchronicities happen. And that is why, as I said there, will freely offer itself to you. And he's talking about being quiet, still. And he means quiet with this, not listening to this. It has no choice. Well, it won't, because that's what life is. You have fully joined life. This is the life of the ego. So let's have a look at when you're with that, you see more, as I've said. A bus the other day was at the bus stop, and I was behind the bus, and the bus was indicating to pull out. And I flashed the bus so the bus could pull out. It was a narrow road. So I could have overtaken the bus, but I didn't. I flashed, let the bus pass. And lo and behold, what happened was I looked up at the back of the bus, and there were smiley faces and a big notice saying thank you. I thought that was fantastic. So they've designed that into the system that when the driver gave me the thumbs up outside, he stuck his hand outside like thumbs up, thank you. But he must have pressed a little button somewhere that put on smiley faces and said thank you. Now that's what happens when you are with life, when you are helping others, when you are not putting yourself first in terms of ego, when you are going with the flow, realising that everyone lives in their reality, not to get upset about that because that's innocently done. Your reality is no different to their reality. They have their own, which is different to yours. So why throw our toys out of the cot, as it were? So I'm going to, I'm a favourite of Hafiz, the 14th century poet, right? So I'm going to read you a little bit out of this. Nice picture of him, as I've said. Took a good snap of that, didn't they? Yeah, right. Good joke. And this one is called A Divine Invitation. You have been invited to meet the friend. No one can resist a divine intervention, a divine invitation that narrows down all our choices to just two. We can come to God dressed for dancing or be carried on a stretcher to God's word. Fantastic, isn't it? You have been in a divine invitation. You have been invited to meet the friend. That's pure awareness. That's God. That's intelligent energy. No one can resist a divine invitation. Well, no, that's what we do when we get away from this and go into our awareness. That narrows down all our choices to just two. We can come to God dressed for dancing or be carried on a stretcher to God's word. How many of us in our life, right until the end, banging on about this and going on about that and worried about this and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So that's being carried on a stretcher to God's word. Why not do the opposite? As this poem says, prose says, we can come to God dressed for dancing. Great. Now, I remember I once met Louise Hay, fantastic writer, a big supporter of the gay people in New York in the day. And when I met her, it was in London, and it was, I mean, she founded Hay House Radio, Louise Hay. She wrote books on healthy eating. I'm going back to the 70s. She did all this stuff. And so it wasn't just Jamie Oliver who was writing healthy eating. She was doing it like donkeys years ago. Well, 50 years ago, wasn't she? I like Jamie, by the way. Yeah. What was I talking about? So, yeah. Now, what she said, and she was on the stage saying this, and somebody said to her, like, Louise, you're an old lady now, which she was. I mean, she's passed now. But they said, don't you worry about being frail and this and that and t'other, so it's all right. People say, ignore your thoughts about it all, fluffy bunny time. And she looked at this person and said, what are you talking about? No, I don't regret, I don't kind of worry. She says, because I don't live my life like that. What did she say? I laugh, dance, then I'll die. Laugh, dance, die. Laugh, dance, die. That's how it's going to be. And she really meant it. And what she was saying was, until the last minute, I'm going to be either laughing or dancing. That's how I'm going to live my life, because it can be lived like that. And if you read the stuff about her after her passing, that is just how it happened. And another funny there was, I was in a queue to buy her book. And when I got to the front of the queue, I took the book. Well, I bought the book and I gave her it for signing. And I said, could you sign it? And she said, no, I'm not going to sign it. I'm not wasting my life signing books. Go away. So, she really walked the talk. And that's what it's all about. So I'll let's calm down now. Stop me rabbiting on and just relax. Just be with yourself. Just calm down, just go through your body, just letting the tensions ease right down. Easy scalp, easy jaw, easy shoulders, easy tummy, easy legs. Go right down your body, scan that body and thank it. It's a part of you. And thank this for doing its best. It tries to help. And it does try to help. Just relax. That's wonderful. And just know that when you relax, just come to your awareness. No labels, no judgment. Just being okay now in the moment, because in the moment, in this now, there's nothing wrong with anything. It's so relaxed. And it's nice to be in this place. Just be still. Just be okay, because you are okay. In this moment, in this nowness, just with your awareness, there's nothing wrong. You're totally at ease, totally relaxed. And the wonderful thing is that you are with your consciousness, your awareness, your nowness, your beingness, your essence, which knows what to do. And every time you go to this place, you get infused with the wisdom of what to do. It might not be now when you know what to do. It might be in 2 days' time. It might not be then. It might be in a week's time or a month's time. But you'll get to know. Because that wisdom, another word I could use is spirit for awareness, is with you. It knows what to do. It acts on your behalf because it knows you. And that can refresh you. And it can give you confidence knowing it's there. So as I've said earlier, like the factory, we can have these people arguing with those people. Just go with the flow. You don't have to get heart attacks over all this stuff, because it's not real. The truth is with your awareness. That's real, that's reality, and that's in the now. That's in the now. With no labels, no sides, just pure awareness. No judgment. No judgment, because we're all innocent. We all did what we thought was the right thing to do. We're human. That's human nature. We are spirit on legs. And it's sometimes difficult when they get tired and hurt. But the fact is, spirit is always there. It's okayness. And when we trust that, when you have trust in it and then you see its results, that all of a sudden you get to know what to do. All of a sudden you start feeling okay. All of a sudden you are content. You are content with this aliveness that is running in you, through you. Life energy. It knows what to do. The rest is just a game. It's just a story, just a concept. And we always get better and better at improving those ideas about life when we move away from our thoughts to our awareness, to our spirit. So just rest in that knowingness, that safe haven, that place full of possibilities, full of adventures, excitement, so much more to learn, which it gives you the seeds of knowing. Just being in the present, not the past. Present is always with us. The present is always with us. And it's beautiful. It's restful. It's contentment. It gives you the biggest lever for life. And what happens is that bit by bit, this consciousness feeds into your mind, into your thinking. That's the way it works, not the other way around. It is wisdom superior to intellect. Well, it's not even a comparison. How often do we think it's the other way around, that we think intellect and our thinking is the master? No. It guides us, does our oneness. It's just there. It's there all the time. Just rest in that. Just takes years off your life, because you have a better life whilst you are alive when you come from this inside, not living from the outside, which is the autocue. Stop listening to the autocue. We've got our own inbuilt wisdom and knowing what to do and say, and it comes through when we trust it. It comes through into our thinking, and that's how we will progress. That will be the evolution of thought, being informed by our awareness, by our consciousness. And the more we understand this, and the more we come from that, the better life is. So if you come back fully into the room, and thank you for listening, I hope that's been of benefit to you. I hope to see you again, so you take care. Thank you very much.